Welcome back to the TV program, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today we're reviewing The Web of Spider. This is book number 3 in W. Michael Gear's Spider trilogy, his magnificent space opera, epic saga of just total awesomeness. This came out in 1989. We'll just get it out of the way right from the get-go. I do have most of my Michael Gear books are signed now, and I have probably like 60 or 70 Michael Gear books. I've got all of his science fiction right there in those two shelves. So that's all of Michael Gear's science fiction. Then I've got all of his Western novels down here on this shelf right there. He has written a ton of stuff. He's one of my favorite writers of all time. And a lot of times he collaborates with his wife, Kathleen O'Neill Gear. And I've got all of her stuff too. They're two of my favorite writers of all time. Anyway, this came out in 1989. Book 3 in the trilogy. I reviewed The Way of Spider not long ago. We talked about the covers of all of these. I reviewed The Warriors of Spider about a year ago. That is the trilogy all put together. Each one with a great cover illustration by San Julian. And the covers just look magnificent together. I love them. They're colorful. I love the graphic design. I love the way it's just done. The way in the spines, when you put them all together, they look like they pretty much fit in the same trilogy. So, and those were done by Daw Books. So the whole thing is just spectacular. And if you want to watch my review of Warriors of Spider and Way of Spider, go ahead and do those. Just type in my last name, Warriors of Spider, or Way of Spider. Then the video will magically appear upon your computer screen. I promise you that. It is the way the internet works. Now let's talk about book number 3. I can't really speak much about it without giving away spoilers for book number 1 and 2. But the basic premise of the whole trilogy is, and I will just say right out, I've probably said this, is one of my favorite science fiction sagas ever. I've been reading and rereading these books since 1989 when I bought them at the Yale University bookstore in New Haven, Connecticut. That's where I bought them. Essentially, the start of the series is we're starting on a planet that's far away from Earth, way in the future, and there's been a starship that crash landed there ages ago. The people that descended from the starship, the original starship crew, they are mostly Spanish and Native Americans. And so they set up this colony, and they call themselves the Romanans, and they worship the warrior spider. And so they have prophets. The Indians, the Native American tribes have these prophets that actually can prophesy. They actually see the future, which becomes a huge part of the plot, because what happens is they're living a very primitive life on this planet. I mean, they still have access to the starship that crashed because it's kind of still there, half buried in the ground, and they can still access it and parts of it in different parts of the technology and weaponry, but they're living basically as, in tribes, Spanish tribes, Indian tribes, and they war and fight, and this has been going on for a lot of hundreds of years. And then they are discovered by another starship full of warriors. That's the premise of the whole setup. So it's a crashed ship, this and that, and then we get involved in space opera, just complete awesomeness, because these warriors of Spider, these Spanish and Native Americans, get plucked up off their planet with all of their primitive fighting skills, and they are taken off into starships to learn how to fight for these people that want them to fight. And so now they've doubled their armies with all of these, just ruthless killers, as it were. And one of the things that was in this book is I liked when some of the Native American descendants of actual Earth and actual parts of Alaska start to intermingle with the Native Americans that had been lost on this other planet for a long time. And they start talking about the morals and the honor of killing bears, whether you use a bow or a musket or a rifle or a blaster. Like, which is more honorable? Which is dishonorable? It seems like a blaster's too easy. Maybe we should all be hunting with bows. That's kind of the philosophies that W. Michael Gear sort of interweaves in these books. A lot of, because W. Michael Gear is a professional archaeologist by trade or something like that, because most of his books deal with, the history of our continent, of the North American continent, and all of the archaeology that goes along with that, from the tip of Peru all the way up to the top of Alaska. He knows all of it. And he puts a lot of that stuff in here as sort of mythology and lore. And it makes for a great story, especially because there's the prophets. They have the prophets, and these people in the other starships, they can't even conceive of anybody being able to see the future, but these Native American prophets can see the future, and so they start to use them for their own means, if that makes sense. And so there's a good description of a lot of the plot points and details that are going on in the book on the back, which I will just read that because it's a very convoluted plot. And this doesn't give us any spoilers for the other two books, so I will just read that. So this is the final conflict. The Syrian rebellion had proved the catalyst for the rise of two powerful new forces in the galaxy. Nen Von Chow, leader of the failed rebellion, had fled to a distant world, establishing a base from which he could launch an interstellar holy war of destruction, a war fueled by the discovery of a long-hidden technology which could transfer ordinary men and women into fanatical soldiers of Deuce. While on the long-lost colony planet of World, the Romanans, who I just described as a group of Spanish/Native Americans marooned on a desert island like Gilligan's Island. Okay, so while on the long-lost colony planet of World, the Romanans, known as the Warriors of Spider, and their allies, formerly part of the military police force which kept order among the worlds and stations controlled by the computer network of the Directorate, prepare for civilization's final stand against this seemingly unstoppable conqueror. So, the gist of it is, we've got two warring factions in the galaxy. One of the warring factions discovers this world where the starship has crashed, and there's a bunch of really good warriors living on the world, the Spanish and the Native Americans, and they snatch them off of that world, put them into their starships, and have them fight alongside them. And it is just cool because these Native Americans and Spanish warriors come with their own sort of honors of dueling and knife fights and pistol duels and all these things that they do to save face, along with just a whole bunch of other stuff that they sort of are teaching this more modern army a little bit more of a brutal way to go about winning wars. And that's why they took them off the planet in the first place. It's just an interesting thing with a lot of space opera, starships, blasters, fighting, characters that you care for, all of that stuff. And I mentioned most of the characters in my reviews of these two. But there's Susan Smith Andahar, John Smith Iron Eyes. There's, Lita Dobra, Rudy Sarza. There's just, Nen Von Chow. I could just go on and on, but I won't. Because those names don't mean anything to you in this review. You'd have to look at my other reviews. But anyway, 10 out of 10. I give the whole trilogy, every single one of these books get a 10 out of 10 because these books are some of my favorite ever. And if you really want to get into a great space opera trilogy with just all the world building of Dune plus twice the excitement, there you go.